Dark, cold, and eerie. Those are the only words I can come up with to describe the house in which I had lived with my family for the majority of my life. Mostly dark, blistering cold in the winter, and always eerie. Sometimes there would be strange noises coming from the cellar too. It'd often give me the creeps, though I would never admit that to my mother. I'd figured I was too old for some silly noises to scare me anyway, but I try to act like the man in the house since my dad left since I was 7. I had always hoped I would never turn out like my father, whom I hated with a burning passion. As far as he goes, I'd better leave it at that. In the house with my mother, Linda. I lived in the house with my mother, Linda, and my uncle Kevin, on a vast piece of land in Stenton, Indiana. Stenton was a piece of shit in the middle of nowhere. I mean, it's to the point where no one liked living there. I didn't even have any friends because I was homeschooled, and I never even seen another kid my age in Stenton, since we almost never left the house unless my mom had to go to the town to get some groceries. But, however, I was also very close with my Uncle Kevin. When I was little, he would tell me ghost stories right before bed, which my mother hated.
Stop it, Kev. You're gonna give him nightmares.
She would snap. Oh, I dig in nightmares. Indeed. And sometimes it seems as though the nightmares refused to end. It crept into the back of my mind like a spider crafting its web. The story he told me most often was one about a monster with a contorted body and black eyes, according to the legend, as my uncle called it, even though I know he made it up himself. The monster would come into your room if you were awake past your bedtime and hide in a closet watching you the whole night. Of course, this was just his way of making sure I don't stay up past my bedtime. Even so, I cannot tell you how many times that creature has popped in my head over and over the years. On this particular night, I decided to go to bed early in an attempt to go to sleep off this pounding headache. I lied down in my icy bed and sank underneath the covers, hiding my face from whatever may be lurking inside my head. After settling my glasses down onto the nightstand beside my bed, I reached over and flicked off the light. The darkness made me feel alive in a strange way, almost as though I was mesmerized by the nothingness. As I looked around the room, seeing almost nothing but pitch black darkness surrounding me, I felt entranced, as if something was forcing me to look. Of course, there was nothing to look at least not with the eyes. This was something you can only witness within the deep corridors of your mind. The part of your mind that you always dread visiting and can never seem to return from. Out of nowhere, I begin to hear scratches upon the window above my bed. My eyes immediately burst open, and I felt as though I was unable to close them again. What the fuck was that? I asked myself. Nothing. Of course, it was nothing. Couldn't have been anything, right? Right? Just my mind playing tricks on me in the dark. No big deal. But in a moment of childish curiosity, I decided to peer out the window, just to make sure I was hearing nothing more then a tree branch brushing up against the glass. But then that's when it hit me like a ton of bricks. There's no tree next to my window. Still, I decided it would be better to sleep it off and think more about it in the morning. It was probably all in my head. It had to be. I found it unusually difficult to fall asleep that night. As if somebody or something was trying to keep me up. I woke up the next morning with that sound still locked to my brain. It had been coming from somewhere. But where? Shit, I had no idea. But then I remembered. The cellar. I built up as much courage as I possibly could muster and slowly crept down into the abyss. Jesus, I have not been down there in a year, maybe even longer. Had almost forgotten what it looked like. Nothing but clouds of cobwebs and stacked up cardboard boxes shoved in against the wall. I rustled through a couple of boxes until I stumbled upon a picture that I had drawn when I was a child. It was a sketch of a grotesque creature. Definitely wasn't human. This thing barely even had a face. Just dark black eyes and no mouth. Its body was tall and thin and was contorted in a shape I have never seen before. The more I looked at the drawing, the more I remember that story my uncle used to tell me. It appeared to be raining above the creature, and towards the bottom of the paper I had scribbled, "Please stay awake," in giant letters. I didn't know what the hell that even was supposed to mean, but I folded up the paper and stuffed it in my pocket. I quickly made my way up the stairs into the kitchen and went about my day as usual, keeping that drawing in my mind, trying to remember what it meant and why I'd drawn it in the first place. I looked outside and noticed that it had begun to rain. I didn't want to think about the creature any longer, so I walked into my dimly lit room and plopped myself into bed. I fell asleep before I even knew it. I awoke at exactly 3 a.m. This night was colder and darker than usual. The farm was soaked with rain from earlier in the evening. The moon was full and radiant. It almost didn't look real. For an instant, I glanced out my bedroom window and I could have sworn I saw something walking quickly through the yard. When it spotted me, it slunk behind a tree as if it was trying to hide from me. It looked exactly like what I have drawn when I was a child. I ran into Uncle Kevin's room and began shaking him awake. Kevin! He rubbed the rim out of his eyes. "What, bud?" "Oh, it's late," he asked, bewildered at my excitement. I looked at him in his bloodshot eyes and softly said, "I saw someone in the yard." Kevin looked at me with hesitation. "No, son, you probably just saw an animal. Get back to bed." "I know what I saw. This was no animal, or at least not that one I've ever seen. Not even in my worst fucking nightmares I knew I couldn't tell him exactly what I had seen, as he would never believe me. No, Kevin. It was not an animal. Please. It was a man. Look, just please go out and look." Uncle Kevin leapt up and grabbed his shotgun from under the bed. "All right, come on, show me where he is. Let's try not to wake your mom. I'll scare that fucker right off." We went outside and I pointed at the tree. I whispered to Kevin, "I saw him go behind the tree." My uncle bravely walked over to the tree and peered around it. Nothing. Just nothing. He searched the entire farm for well over half an hour, but never found anyone or anything. And look, let's go back in. There's no one here. Keep the doors locked tonight. He was wrong. I knew there was something out there. I crawled into bed and threw the covers over my face. I could hear the blistering wind coming from outside. It pierced my ears with a whistle that I thought only dogs could detect. Suddenly, I heard a tapping sound upon my window. The sound grew louder with each tap. I tightened the blankets around my body. The taps slowly turned into knocks. Louder and faster the knocks became. The knocks turned into bangs. I thought the glass was going to break. Then out of nowhere it stopped. No more taps. No more knocks. No more bangs. No more wind. I was relieved. Suddenly, I heard a low, chilling voice in my ear.
Please stay awake.
No, it couldn't be. No, it couldn't be. I ran out into the hallway and ready to make a way to my mother's room when I saw it. Whatever it was, I still don't know. It was holding Kevin's lifeless body, mangled in his arms. Carved deeply into my uncle's torso were the words,
Please stay awake.
I tried to scream, but only silence filled the dead air. I sprinted to the door of my mother's room and saw her body lying in the middle of the floor. It was covered in blood, and her left arm has been ripped straight off of its socket. Written next to her in her own blood were the words, please stay awake. I began to sob, and when I turned around, the creature was gone. I don't know where the hell it went, and I'm not sure I want to. I closed my eyes as tightly as I could and let out the loudest scream I could muster. I called the police and lied down on the cold, now blood-soaked floor, and waiting for them to arrive. It felt like hours. Finally, the police showed up to find me in a fetal position next to my mother's corpse. I told them everything I saw. I showed them my drawing. I told them about the taps, the knocks, the bangs. I told them about what I seen outside. But of course, they wouldn't hear a word of it. Why would they? All they could see was a lonely kid hovering over his dead mother, her blood covering my clothes almost as much as it covered the floor. It's cold in this cell. It's dark and lonely. The silence is the only saving grace. Constant, peaceful silence. Tonight, it's raining outside, and it's colder and darker and wetter than it's ever been. But unfortunately, I must stop writing now. I just heard a tap at my window.